What if I told you that everything you're experiencing right now, the colors you see, the sounds you hear, even the thoughts running through your mind, isn't actually happening the way you think it is? What if your brain is constantly editing, filtering, and even fabricating parts of your reality without you ever knowing? And what if understanding this one simple truth could free you from so much of the mental suffering you've been carrying? Right now, as you listen to these words, your mind is creating a version of reality that exists nowhere else in the universe but inside your head. I know this might sound unsettling at first. You've probably spent your whole life believing that what you see is what's real, that your thoughts are facts, and that your emotional reactions are justified responses to actual events happening around you. It's completely natural to feel attached to this version of reality. After all, it's the only one you've ever known. But here's what I've discovered, and what many people are starting to realize. So much of our daily stress, anxiety, and mental overwhelm comes from fighting against a reality that our minds have constructed. We argue with our thoughts as if they're absolute truth. We react to situations based on our interpretations rather than what's actually happening. We create elaborate stories about what other people think, what the future holds, or what our past mistakes mean about who we are. The exhaustion you feel isn't just from life being hard. It's from constantly wrestling with a reality that your own mind is creating moment by moment. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain receives about 11 million bits of information every second, but you can only consciously process about 40 bits. That means 99.9% of what's available to you right now is being filtered out without you even realizing it. Your mind is like a film editor, constantly cutting, splicing, and rearranging the raw footage of life into a story that makes sense to you. But here's the remarkable part. Different people editing the same footage create completely different movies. The argument you had with your friend yesterday, they experienced an entirely different version of that same conversation. The challenging situation at work that's been keeping you up at night. Someone else in that exact same situation might see it as an opportunity or barely notice it at all. Your brain doesn't just passively record reality. It actively constructs it based on your past experiences, your current emotional state, your beliefs, and even your physical condition. When you're tired, the world looks more overwhelming. When you're stressed, neutral comments feel like criticisms. When you're happy, the same rainy day that would normally frustrate you becomes cozy and peaceful. This isn't a flaw in your system. It's actually incredibly sophisticated. Your mind is trying to protect you, to help you navigate the world efficiently, to keep you safe. But sometimes this protective mechanism creates a version of reality that causes more suffering than the actual circumstances warrant. And in just a moment, I'm going to share with you a simple shift in perspective that can help you step back from the reality your mind creates and find a kind of peace that doesn't depend on changing anything external in your life. Think about the last time you were convinced something terrible was about to happen. Maybe you were waiting for test results, or you sent a message and didn't hear back, or you noticed your boss seemed distant. In those moments, your mind likely created an entire narrative about what was happening and what it meant. You probably felt real physical symptoms: tension in your shoulders, a knot in your stomach, racing thoughts. But here's what's fascinating. The story your mind created in that moment was just one possibility out of thousands. And most of the time, the terrible thing you were so convinced would happen never actually materialized. Your mind had created a vivid, detailed reality that felt absolutely true in the moment, but it was essentially a work of fiction. This happens with positive experiences too. Have you ever anticipated something wonderful, only to have the actual experience feel somehow different or less satisfying than what you'd imagined? That's because your mind had already created its own version of that future reality, and no external experience could match the perfect movie playing in your head. Understanding this changes everything. It means that when you're feeling overwhelmed by a situation, you're not just dealing with the situation itself. You're dealing with your mind's interpretation of it. You're reacting to the story, not the facts. You're fighting against the edited version of reality that your brain has created, not what's actually happening in this moment. This doesn't mean your feelings aren't valid or that your experiences don't matter. It simply means that there's space between what happens and what you make it mean. There's a gap between the raw data of your life and the story your mind tells you about that data. And in that gap lies an incredible opportunity for freedom. When you realize that your mind is constantly creating reality rather than just observing it, you can start to become curious about the stories it's telling you, instead of automatically believing them. So here's a simple practice you can start using right now. When you notice yourself feeling stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, pause and ask yourself this question: what story is my mind telling me about this situation right now? Don't try to figure out if the story is true or false. Just notice what narrative your mind has created. Maybe it's telling you that you're behind in life, that someone is disappointed in you, or that something bad is about to happen. Maybe it's creating a story about what you should be doing differently, or what others think of you. Once you can see the story clearly, ask yourself, what would I notice if I looked at this situation without this story? This isn't about positive thinking or trying to convince yourself that everything is fine. It's about creating space between you and the automatic narrative your mind produces. Sometimes you'll discover that the actual facts of the situation are much more neutral than the story made them seem. Other times, you'll realize that even if the story contains some truth, it's not the only possible interpretation of what's happening. The goal isn't to stop your mind from creating stories. That's impossible and actually not helpful. The goal is to recognize when you're living inside a story rather than responding to what's actually happening right now. This simple awareness can transform your relationship with stress, anxiety, and mental overwhelm. Remember, this isn't about getting it perfect or never being caught up in your mind's stories again. It's about developing a gentle awareness that allows you to step back from the intense movie your mind creates and find some breathing room. Every time you catch yourself in a story and can recognize it as a story, you're building a muscle of awareness that will serve you in countless situations. You're learning to be less reactive and more responsive. You're discovering that your peace doesn't depend on controlling every external circumstance. It depends on understanding how your mind relates to those circumstances. This shift in perspective is subtle but profound. It's the difference between being trapped inside your thoughts and being able to observe them with curiosity and compassion. If this resonates with you, I'd love to continue exploring these ideas together. There's so much more to discover about how your mind works and how you can find greater peace and clarity in your daily life. Consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights always add so much depth to these conversations, and I genuinely appreciate being part of your journey toward greater understanding and inner calm.